In this video, we talked to Christy about her $75,000 website. She started the site in October of 2018, so it's a little over a year old. She just hit $2,500 per month, and we talk about her journey so far. We talk about her content approach, keyword approach, link building, and so on. Christy's been on the show a few times because she is a student of the 5-Figure Niche Site course. So if you were watching this video during the week of like January 13th through the 17th, 2020, enrollment is open. So I encourage you to check out the link in the description if you want to work from the same blueprint and framework that Christy worked from. All right, let's get to the interview now. Hey, what's going on? It's Doug Cunnington here for The Doug Show, and I'm here with Christy. How are you doing today?
Hey, Doug, I'm good.
And you are a student of 5-Figure Niche Site. This is something like your third appearance. So thanks a lot for taking the time. And for the people that have not heard the other episodes with you, can you just give a little intro about yourself and like your full-time job, how you got into niche sites and that sort of thing?
Sure. I got into niche sites about a year and a half ago, I would say. My full-time job is in marketing. So I actually run my own business, and I started getting into the niche site thing just because I actually heard you on a podcast and was interested in it and just kept educating myself ever since. So that's my background.
Very cool. And the reason why you're on here is you hit a great milestone recently. So can you share like the earnings, the most recent earnings from the last month? And we're publishing this very close to the time we're recording it, which I don't always do. But yeah, so what are your results right now?
Sure. The site started back in October of 2018. So it's gone through all of 2019. Through 2019, it earned over $13,000. And then in just the last month of December, which of course over the holidays could be a little wonky, but that was just like spitting distance to 2,500.
Cool.
So that was exciting.
Very good. Congratulations. I know that's a big milestone, and you're pretty, like, I would say goal oriented. Would you say type A as well?
I think we would both say that.
Okay. So self-admitted,
Yes.
not that it's a bad thing.
Self-awareness, super high.
So you set some like pretty specific goals of like what you wanted to hit and what that would allow you to do. So can you just talk about like some of those goals and milestones, and then like right now, what is this like $2,500 a month doing for you?
Sure. So right at the beginning, and I think it was based on one of your emails that you sent out, right at the start was, coming up with your why, basically, and why you want to have a niche site. And hopefully, it's a reason that's a little deeper than I want to make $1 million overnight. It probably isn't the way to do that. But you would encourage us to basically come up with our why and what our goals would be. So I came up with about 10 financial milestones that I wanted to hit, just mostly based on like what I currently make for my job, because that's the only reference point I have. And then for each of those categories, I would say basically what could that pay for? So, this month it might cover my pet expenses. At this level, it would cover my mortgage. At this level, it would cover, mortgage plus a vacation or something like that. So as I go along, I do kind of keep track of where I am on that milestone list. And yeah, I'm trucking along. I'm on like number 3.
Very good.
That's good.
Congratulations. I mean, it's a lot of money. For most people, that's going to pay for a mortgage and a little bit more, depending on like how big of a house or whatever their domicile is. So that's awesome. I think it's interesting to note that you've been able to hit an ROI positive point pretty quickly because you've done a lot of work yourself. And I think that's impressive. Like, can you share a little bit about like the expenses and that sort of thing? You don't have to go too deep in detail, but just sort of high level.
Yep. When I looked back on all of 2019, like I said, the site made a little over $13,000 for the year. And then of that, I had about 80, almost $9,000 that I put into it. Now, not all of that though was actually going into the site. So there was a good chunk of that that was educational expenses that were
You
one
paid
time,
me.
right? Like buying a course, because I
Yeah.
had no idea what I was doing. And, those are investments that, like I said, that's not going to be a year over year site investment to keep it going. But I was willing to invest in the educational piece right up front. And then another probably 5,000 of that was for content. My approach was that if, you know, I wanted to fail faster, essentially. And, because I had some disposable income that I could put into it, I wanted to really grow the content over the first year and see if the model held, right? And if it was worth putting more time and energy into. So for me, that was worth it. You definitely don't have to invest that much right away. But, again, when you think about it, if I put in, let's just say $9,000 for the first year, well, last month I made 2,500. So, like if I can put in a fair amount up front and then get a higher functioning site with better monthly income, like that makes it back uh, quite a bit quicker. So
Yes.
that for me is that's still worth it.
Gotcha. Yep. And some people may be thinking, oh, I can't believe like $5,000. That's a crazy amount of money. But it
Yeah.
wasn't all at once, number one. And then you saw that what you were doing was working. So maybe you started small and then you increased the expenses as you felt comfortable with it, right?
Correct. I spent probably $500 on my first set of 10 articles that were the first ones I ever outsourced. So
Cool.
definitely started small and made sure that I even liked doing that as an option. So
Right, right. Okay. And just at a broad level, one of the questions that I want to ask is like, what's the reason for the site's success? And it's, you could take it in whatever direction because there's a lot of moving pieces and the way you approached it.
yeah, well, the first thing I would say is I'm in there almost every day. So part of that is because I chose a niche that I'm personally interested in. I think it would be different if I was writing about something I didn't care about, vacuum cleaners or something, which I did buy a vacuum cleaner after visiting a niche site. I do want to say that, but so they are useful. But for me personally, it's not my passion. So for me, it's a lifestyle blog and I'm on it every day because I enjoy doing it. So I think that's a big piece of it is that it wasn't something that I just started, worked on for 2 months, got bored of, and expected it to keep making a lot of money. So for me, just being able to continually be in there and like doing it, like working on it is a huge thing. The other thing I would say for me personally is that having a marketing background, the site looks professional, the content is professional. I've been a writer for years, so I spend a ton of time on editing, which I know a lot of people don't like spending time on. And it is a huge time suck. I won't lie about that. But I also feel a lot better about the content that I put out. So for me, it's worth it. It also keeps me really tuned into what content I have when I've been outsourcing things. So it's really easy to get so much content that you forget what's even out there, what you've covered, what you haven't, what you can link to. So spending more time in there editing actually helps me out, at least in the short term.
Perfect.
So having a professional looking site, nice content that's edited, and then just, being in every day, kind of working on it. I think those are all distinguishing factors for me.
Cool. And I have seen, I've interviewed a lot of people, a lot of students, and I know that people get obsessed. So you're describing that you're obsessed with it. I get
I am
that.
a little obsessed with it.
I'm like that in various areas. Ron Stefanski, he
Mm-hmm.
gets into it. John Dykstra, he's into the process and
Yep.
all that stuff. Marty McLeod, Evan Porter, like either they're doing the writing, they're obsessed with it, they're into it. Um, definitely a common thread where people enjoy either the topic or the process.
Right.
I'm kind of process oriented. So I don't always get obsessed with like vacuum cleaners or whatever. And I don't know who would be, but the people like the
There are
process
people.
of reviewing it. So,
Right.
one other thing I want to point out. So we're like taking a snapshot right now. We're like $2,500 a month. That's great. And I want to emphasize that people should listen to the other episodes because you hit other milestones. I think 100 and then $1,000 per
Exactly.
month. But when you shared the graph, which people could check out on the video, and I'll share the screen and all that stuff. But basically, this is like slow, gradual growth. There was never a like huge, massive jump. There were a couple like like 1 month was like 3x, and then there was another jump.
Right. Yep.
But in general, it wasn't like all of a sudden you're making like huge amounts of money. It's just like slow plodding progress. So how do you keep motivated when it's so slow and you didn't know if it was
Yeah.
going to work?
Well, I think the first thing was to just set my expectations correctly. You were a piece of that, definitely. I think you were really upfront in the course and just in your other materials of saying this isn't an overnight thing, right? And I think once you start learning more about how Google works, how SEO works, then it really clicks of, yeah, this is going to take some time. But the nice thing about, doing the KGR, at least in the beginning, is that you do see some progress and you can see some results right away, which is the key to staying motivated, right? So if I hadn't seen a single dollar in 6 months, I probably wouldn't continue. And that's really realistic if you don't go after like some KGR keywords, right? So if I had only gone after giant keyword traffic phrases, I probably would have burned out also, no matter how passionate I was about the topic. So I think it's really important right up front to tell yourself that if you need a quick fix, if you need like a way to pay your mortgage next month, this is not that. But for me, I wanted something supplemental to kind of diversify my life income, right, from my other business. And I wanted something that I would enjoy working on in my own time and eventually could be more of a lifestyle for me than running a services-based business, which I do now.
Perfect. And another thing I want to point out and emphasize, so we talked about some of the expenses and you like broke even before, you're making profit now, you could reinvest like comfortably and you're continuing to make a profit each month. The value of your site is probably in the like $70,000 to $90,000
That's a
range if
nicer
you were to
number.
sell it. Yeah. So like if someone is thinking, hey, that's a lot of money that you spent,
Right.
it's actually worth quite a bit if you look at evaluation, if you
Yeah.
shopped it around. I know because you're obsessed with it and you spend so
Not
much
going
time,
there.
you're not going to sell it, but
Yeah.
it's comforting
But
to
you are
know.
building an asset, and should an emergency arise, you built something of value, which I do think is important.
Yeah. So, yep, you put in a lot of money, even more time, but you have like an asset that's very clear that there's value there. So, very good. Mistakes. So, we all end up making some mistakes, even with expert guidance and
Yep.
when you try to do a good job. So, can you talk about a few mistakes that you made?
Yeah. I think there were quite a few things that I did partly well, which I classify as partly mistakes. So, one of the things that I did well was create like an Excel spreadsheet right off the top. Every article, like my checklist of what needs to be done, every article. So I have a really clear sense of like every post that's out there, when it was posted, like how long I expect it to take to rank, all that good stuff. That's nice. I did not do that for things like images, right? Which I now kind of wish I'd gone back and done, that I'd kept track of which free stock sites I got things from just to cover my bases. Once you're 200 posts in, that seems pretty giant to go back. Had I to do it again, I would probably add that to my nice little spreadsheet, just as like a comfort factor. So that would be one. I would also be a little bit more strategic about the social media stuff. What I did well was focusing on Pinterest primarily. I wrote another article about Pinterest and how it drove, I think it was like 13 to 15% of my early traffic. And I think it's still right around there. I think it was like 15 or 18% last time I checked for the year, which is really good when you're still trying to get organic traffic and you want it from anywhere. So for me, Pinterest was a great place to go because it is a search engine. So you can apply a lot of what you're already doing on the site to Pinterest. So that was good. I wish that I had not started an Instagram. Kind of a time suck, and I don't work on it, and I don't like doing it. So that's probably not a huge advantage to be spending any time on, or just the time spent feeling guilty about not spending time on it. I don't need to be doing that.
Yeah.
So I would have been a little bit more strategic about that. I think the other thing I would have spent more time on is the link building, which you and I have been talking about lately, and just doing a little bit more of that along the way. So for me, I needed to focus on content, right? And that was where I put all my time, my energy, and I got to like 200 articles, and I felt really good about that. And then now we're to the point where I need to catch up on the link building. So that's kind of the next thing for me. If I were to do it over, I would have been doing that kind of the whole way.
Which is in the course. So I'll just,
it is.
Yes. But I mean, I think part of it's my fault. I talk about this sometimes on YouTube where I'm like, hey, if I put out case studies, like sometimes people like focus and just really focus on that one piece. And I know because I've gotten probably over 100 emails where someone's like, I'm going to publish 200 articles in 5 months, which is exactly what I did. But I can't blame you, right? You had a content background, you're a writer, you like the topic, you like working with freelancers and hiring people, like it fit perfectly. And obviously, I mean, it's working for you, but I think, yeah, we can take it to the next level by, you know, I guess patching up the area where you've kind of neglected, and there's a lot of approaches to it. Now, you have done some very interesting link building and outreach. Do you want to hit like a couple of the ideas that you've talked about before?
One of the early things I did that I didn't know if it would really pay off at all was that there was a vlogger in my niche that I noticed was fundraising. She had a project and she needed to basically cover some expenses to be able to do it. So that was the point where I thought, you know what, I'm just going to reach out to her. I have barely a site at all, but I'm going to just see if she would write for me if I donated towards this cause that she wants to support. And she said yes immediately. Like I felt like I had just been contacted by like, I don't know, like some kind of rock stars. Like I was like so butterfly about it that this vlogger that I've been watching, like she said yes, she's just gonna write for my site. Just really very cute. And so I brought her on for 10 articles, like right up front, because it was good for her, it was good for me, and it gave me a real boost because people that followed her would go to her articles, and it really showed Google, you know, in those first like 2 months that there were people actively searching for the name of my site, for her content. So that was huge. And I can now use her as basically an example of someone that I've worked with. So hands down, love that, would do that again. So that was the very first thing that I did. I also created, along the same lines, basically a media guide for bloggers in my niche. So I spend way too much time on YouTube, not all of it watching affiliate content, although obviously I do that too. So I pulled out probably 10 or 12 of the people that I watched the most, and I created a media guide as a resource saying, here are the people you should be watching. Every person got their own dedicated page, my top 5 videos for them, like all the key players. So it was a decent amount of work to do that, but it also brought in, I think, like 6,000 page views in the first year, which for a new site is good. And I will take that. And again, it's just people that now that I'm going to focus on outreach, those are the people that I can easily go back to. And it's a bit of a warm intro, right? To say, hey, I've been following you. Here's the proof of that, right? That I talk about what you're doing and I love what you're doing. So let's partner on XYZ. So those are two ways that, were not things that I necessarily heard about people doing, but in my specific niche, blogging is big. And so I wanted to take advantage of that.
If you highlighted like a perfect example where you landed that first vlogger, and now you could say, hey, I worked with this person. They could see that very clearly. They could go check it out. And then they realize, okay, like you're doing interesting things. And by the way, I was impressed when you did this, but like in the very beginning, but it's like you didn't have much content on your site.
Nope.
There was no track record. It was like a couple months old max, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think people
10 articles on it.
Yes. When I launched, I know it's a different space, but I launched Niche Site Project, and I did the same thing. I had maybe 4 articles, and internet marketing is pretty competitive because there's a bunch of marketers doing
Right.
it. But I was able to network in a similar way, like talking with people that maybe shouldn't like care who I am or anything like that. And they were like, okay, like we'll see how it goes. And if you get 1 or 2 of those, then other people with a social proof are more likely to work with you. So you put yourself out there, it worked out. Now a year later, you're able to like land other bigger fish or whatever. So.
Right.
Okay.
And it was something where I could feel good about it too, because I wasn't just asking for something, right? I was reaching out because this person had a need and something that they wanted to be doing, and I could also help with that. So that it felt like a really good initial transaction. So
similarly, and I just remembered I landed an interview with actually a few at this point, a much bigger vlogger, because I knew that they were releasing a book. They were launching a book, and I was like, oh, they'll talk to anyone who asks. And not that many, it was the wrong space.
Yep.
Like people didn't care, but I made a contact and ended up, I actually met one of the VAs that I worked with for a long time. This is going way tangent here. So I met a VA who ended up working with me for years, who actually helped my wife get a job. And that's why we moved. So like through that, I forgot that that's how it was all tied together. But it was like a friend of a friend, and then her mom, and then blah, blah, blah. So then we moved.
I mean, I think you have to make it personal, right? Because everyone's running an internet business, anyone that you're going to talk to here, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it gets really, I think it gets lonely for people, right? That are even putting out a lot of content, like vloggers, podcasters. Like, is anyone listening? Is anyone watching? Like, are they just in it for the free content from me? And so to have someone reach out and be like, I see this is what you're doing in your life, right? I would like to help support you in that. That's a nice email to receive, right? And it's a nice one to be able to send. So the more that you kind of watch people in your space that you do want to connect with and genuinely reach out when they have things going on, that's nice for everybody.
Awesome. For the content, I know you emphasized editing, make sure that it's high quality. Do you have any other tips, especially for people who aren't writers or they don't see it as one of their strengths?
I think you can definitely have a successful niche site and outsource a lot of the content, right? So if you do have some disposable income to do that, I worked with UpWork writers for the very first time, just based on your recommendation to do it. That made me very nervous. I am, like you said, a control freak about that stuff. And I wasn't really sure that I wanted anyone else writing content. And I still see a ton of people in Facebook groups that are like, I won't let anyone write on my site. No guest posts, no nothing. I write everything to keep the integrity, which I guess is fine. But there are tons of people who know stuff that I don't, right? I'm not be end all of my niche, right? So to me, it's like, yeah, I don't want a site where I haven't written anything, but nor do I want to say where I'm the only one contributing. Like that leaves a ton of topics that people want to know about that I just can't write about. That's not my background. I don't have any experience in it. Um, so for me, it's like I can go out and find people on Upwork who are lovely to work with. It turns out I wasn't sure that would be the case either. They're lovely. And I can find people who have different skills and different backgrounds than I do. And yes, their writing may not be exactly how I would do it. So fine, I spend time editing it and I make
Yep.
it more like what I like. And that's okay. But for me, it was like, if I want to cover more topics, I need to go find people who are experts on those topics that I can't write about. So I've written a couple other articles for you about how I did that Upwork process, like start to finish. And it was super successful. Like I had a really good experience, and I know some people don't. But I think it's all about how you approach it, and especially about how you interact with your writers. Like I think that's a really big deal. And as a writer, I know that I appreciate that. So, for me, it's about treating them like people, appreciating their expertise, keeping track of who does a good job and who doesn't, and then offering them topics that they're going to find interesting instead of me just assigning things, right? So I want to know their background and I want to give them things that they're excited to write about. So that's worked out great.
Yes. People should definitely check out the basically it's like a full guide on how to hire people, the exact templates. And in fact, I know one of my friends who was doing really well with her site already followed the guide. She had something like 90 articles written in a pretty short time. I can't remember. It was more than I thought she should try, but she did it and it worked out well. And I think she even like,
Sweetest note.
yeah, she like personally reached
Very
out to you.
sweet.
Yeah. So that worked out really well. So we're going to start wrapping up here. And do you have any, you gave us so many tips already, but from like maybe a higher level or mindset approach, do you have tips for people who are either looking to get started or they're just getting started? Maybe they're just making a few bucks a month.
I think the mindset is key. So knowing at the outset that it's not going to be an overnight thing, that's a biggie, right? You have to set your expectations correctly. There are the anomalies, right? And they're all over the internet of someone that made, a ridiculous amount of money in 3 months or something. That's great. That's probably not going to be you, and that's okay. That's all right. Um, but I think the big thing for me is finding one or two like educators that you're going to follow instead of trying to follow everyone, right? So I chose you and maybe one or two other people that I, watch their blogs and things. Everybody has a different approach, and if you try to follow everyone, your site is going to be just like soup, right? It's not going to work out. So find a couple people that you really think are doing a good job, follow their advice. The other thing, this is a little thing, but I wish I'd done it sooner. I created basically a what I did when list. So I only created that maybe 4 months ago because I was having such a struggle remembering when I did big things. So when I was then looking at the data a couple of months later, I could see a spike and I couldn't relate it to anything. I was like, great, something happened in the middle of August. I don't know. I don't know if I contributed to that or not. So now I just have like literally a text file where I do something that's major. Like if I take ads off a group of posts, I put that in the file, right, with the date that I did it. So then if I see a blip, if I see something different in the data, I can go back to my list of what I did when and align it at least a little bit to see if I contributed to whatever just happened. So I would have done that from the beginning. It doesn't have to be every task that you do, like just the big stuff that you think might make a difference later. So I would do that. And then I probably would have, and you may disagree with me on this, I probably would have put in ads a little sooner, but I like having the diversified income. For me, that's just a safer place to be. So I put ads in probably 6 months ago. I use Mediavine. I love them. And that was really cool to be able to have a second source. So now I'm going through and deciding which posts to take ads off of. Buyer's intent posts, for example, like you suggested, go back and take maybe the top 10 buyers posts by traffic, take ads off of those and see if you make more from Amazon or other affiliates than you did from ads. So that's kind of the trial period I'm going through now. But having ads on my site, I don't regret that. You can control a lot about how many there are, and that's great. But now I'm to the point where I can go back and say, okay, where could I be getting more from Amazon and other affiliates? Where could I make up more than I'm losing in ads? So that's where I am now. But those are a couple of things I would have done.
And I'm glad you pointed that out. I forgot to highlight that. So I think you're making like 2/3 from Amazon and then about 1/3 from other sources, mostly display ads.
Last month, I think was like 1,500 from Amazon and then about 900 from ads. So yeah, perfect. I did not lose as much by taking ads off of this first 10 trial posts. I made more than that. Granted, it was holiday season, so we'll see. But holidays not a big thing for me. So.
And it's a whole other debate. Maybe we could talk about just, like you said, I was like, hey, don't put ads on.
Yep.
And then other people are like, put ads on, you can make more, which you almost always will.
Sure.
But there's always a trade-off. Maybe. Not always. I mean,
for sure.
Maybe the trade-off isn't as big of a deal. But anyway, it's debatable. And I could see that because like when you started showing me how much you were making, I was like, well, that's significant. Right. So excellent.
Yep, I agree. But it's a balance for sure. And you kind of just have to trial and error which ones are good for ads and which ones aren't. And you may be leaving some money on the table either place. And that's just the name of the game. So.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for joining us. And if people have questions for you, they can leave a comment on the video or like a comment on the podcast or whatever. You could also like leave a voicemail if you want to, and then maybe we'll do another round where we answer questions potentially. So thanks a lot. Definitely appreciate you taking the time today.
You bet. Thanks for the guidance. Appreciate it.
And to Christy, and thank you for watching the video. If you have any questions for Christy, leave them in the comments. We'll circle back around and get her to answer those questions for you. And if you're interested in 5-Figure Niche Site, you should check it out. If you happen to be watching this in the future and enrollment is not open, you can still go to 5figurenichesite.com, click the green button, enter your name and email. I'll send you several emails. I'll send you all the templates that I use, and you'll be notified the next time the course opens up. But if you're watching it this week, January 13th through the 17th in the year 2020, you should be able to enroll. Just go to 5figurenichesite.com/launch. We'll catch you on the next video.